Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Racial Equity Leadership Network Prospective Fellows webinar. I am Dr. Kenita Williams, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at the Southern Education Foundation. Want to start just by thank you for being here today. We know this is an extremely busy time of the year with probably testing, gearing up to wrap up for the end of the school year. So just want to thank you for taking the time to join us for this informational webinar. And Ashley, next slide, please. So just a little bit about the flow of the next hour, 45 minutes to an hour, possibly. I'll start by giving a brief snapshot of SEF, the Southern Education Foundation as an organization. That will be followed by an overview of the Racial Equity Leadership Network Fellowship, which I'll refer to as RELN probably most of the time. We'll then transition to what I believe is one of the most valuable aspects of today, and we will be hearing from RELN alum about their firsthand experience about the fellowship. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the application process and open it up for Q&A. One note about question and answer. We do have time reserved at the end, but we can take questions throughout if they are pressing. Please chat your questions in the box. And we have my colleague Ashley, who's joining me today, who's SEF's Senior Leadership Development Program Associate, and she'll be monitoring that. So I think without further ado, we will just get right into it. So a little bit about the Southern Education Foundation. So SEF was founded in 1867, really in the wake of the Civil War, to establish a system of public education for the newly emancipated population. For really two reasons. One, to create a system of education for all peoples, regardless of their status, but also to begin to see this notion of a collective responsibility for educating people, regardless of their status in the country. So really, for over 150 plus years, we'll be 156 this year, I think, 57. 56, we have been working in this space of access and opportunity for traditionally underserved communities. So what that looks like today is really working to advance equitable policies and practices in our 17-state footprint. So we cover a pretty large regional space, swath of the states, to ensure what we hope for is true racial equity, and that is that race is no longer a reliable predictor of student success, and that students, regardless who they are when they enter buildings, get what they need when they need it, so they are propelled to opportunity-rich lives that they deserve. And we really use three main strategies to do that. We use research and policy, really looking at what's working and advancing those strategies. We use advocacy and government affairs, so really tapping into the policies for systemic change, and then leadership development, which is really the focus of today, because this is one of our leadership development programs where we work to really cultivate this constellation of leaders that can be the change agents for the education system that we want to see. A little bit more about SEF. As I mentioned, we cover a 17-state footprint. So a few states, states across the South, and then a little bit north. We also cover the entire P16 continuum. So we start with early learning through post-secondary, and we would even say P20 sometimes, because we really do tap into workforce development at times. And so I think that's what I will share about SEF. So Ashley, we can go to the next slide. Oh, so one more thing I wanted to say, which is important. So SEF has, I mentioned at leadership development being one of our main strategies or portfolios of work. And we actually have this long, rich legacy in the leadership development space for the overwhelming majority of our 156 years of existence. We work to develop the capacity of promising leaders to really rise to the challenge and be at the helm of creating an education system that works for all children. So an interesting fun fact here, you will see picture W.E.B. Du Bois, who was actually SEF's very first fellow in 1903. And we played an important role in supporting his renowned work, The Souls of Black Folk. So leadership development really is part and parcel to SEF's DNA. So it's only natural that we'd be very intentional about continuing that work today. Next slide, Ashley. So investing in leaders, talking a little bit more on why the Racial Equity Leadership Network. So essentially, we feel that despite all the decades and efforts for education reform, despite the promises of the landmark case of Brown v. Board, really the fundamental architecture of our education landscape is one that continues to advantage some while situating others further from opportunity. Schools are just as segregated. Black and brown children are consistently in chronically failing schools with few resources and even, fewer hopes for success in many cases. And frankly, we just believe in the power of leaders to change this. So this is why we create programs to really help build and strengthen their capacity to do that. We believe that district leaders, that's why we developed the Racial Equity Leadership Network, because we believe district leaders are really that proverbial secret sauce to the change we want to see in public education. Given the practical experience, the connection to policy, and really just the perch within systems and their positional power to impact policy and practice. And so that's why we created the Racial Equity Leadership Network. I also have pictured here or listed here another one of our fellowships, which is the Southern Education Leadership Initiative, which is for emerging leaders, younger leaders in college, graduate school, but just some understanding of why we are really very intentional about investing in leaders. So next slide. So a little bit more about just leadership and SEF's approach. This is our theory of change, so to speak, which is really a double helix. So we see, and we actually developed this model theory of change because of RELN, like it kind of came to existence as we developed the Racial Equity Leadership Network. And so we see this leadership development as this double helix where there are two strands, simultaneous strands of learning, engaging, testing, developing, cultivating over the course of the experience. And so we see one thread really about focusing on individual leadership and really developing that racial equity posture in a leader. And that is their understanding of their individual leadership as that first critical lever for transformation, really having a commitment to the work. And then once you have your understanding and your commitment, ensuring that you have the competencies that align with what it means to lead for equity, because it is a very different type of leadership. The second strand is really more about influencing systems change. And so while we are working to develop this individual leadership and this racial equity posture, there are also very real things in the systems happening that we need to address. And so we really just type of focus on systems and schools and what's actually happening. So really looking at the nature and the magnitude of racial gaps or disparities, what are the drivers, the contributing factors of those disparities, and then really thinking about what are those critical levers of change, what are the high leverage areas that we can really focus in to really start to see some systemic change or transformations in our schools. Next slide, please, Ashley. So this is just a little bit about that influencing systems change. You'll see more as you get into RELN if you apply, which we hope you will, around kind of where it's, I would call it our North Star. Like we have this wheel of what we think an equitable system really looks like. And so obviously you can't see this on the slide, but centered is really students, but there are just other critical levers that should be pulled. A clear and compelling vision for racial equity. Are you using data-driven decision-making? Do you have community partnerships? Those type of things. So you'll see more about this in the long run, but like really, not next slide yet, but really we think the whole community is responsible for this and should be engaged and enroll. And so students, families, teachers, all participating in this continuous cycle of developing, refining, and implementing solutions to systemic racial inequities. So thank you. Next slide. So about the network, we're going to talk a little bit more about RELN and what that actually is at a very high level. So SEF launched the Racial Equity Leadership Network in 2017. And it is really an 18-month cohort-style fellowship designed to build the will, skill, and capacity of district leaders that acknowledge that they have some persistent and pervasive racial gaps or racial disparities in student access, opportunity, outcomes, and they want to remedy those. And so what we do is every year try to bring together a cohort of leaders up to 12. We try to have no more than 12 because we want to be able to have really invest in each leader individually from school districts in the South that are committed to working on a specific equity challenge in their systems. And so each candidate, the eligibility is we talk about superintendents, but it really is for C-suite or executive leaders in the district. And so it could be superintendent, a deputy superintendent, chiefs of staff, senior advisors, chief academic officers, chief equity officers. And one of the really high level, really important components of RELN is that we don't believe that change rests on one set of shoulders. So we also try to really activate other people in the district to work in conjunction with the district leader. And so you would be responsible for really pulling together an equity team in your district to join in the learning and really support in the equity challenges. So next slide. So here is a little more about what RELN actually looks like. As we said, it's 18 months of a fellowship, but there's actually one continuous year of programming. And so each of these over the course of the year, we bring district leaders together for convenings for about 2.5 days to do some intensive workshopping and learning around the equity challenge, and also learn a curriculum around what we think are these critical levers for change. And so they're about quarterly. We bring them together about every 3 months. And so the first session is really kind of that kickoff, really getting to know your cohort, getting to know the faculty and staff of SCF and our RELN faculty, and really starting to understand activating your own individual leadership as that first critical lever for change, and understanding why you need a compelling vision for equity. And then, the next quarter, we bring you together about new approaches to equities. And that's really about focusing on the data in the system and, really thinking through what that could look like to be doing leadership and racial equity in a very different way in your system. Third, convening is really much more about enrolling others in the process and building community partnerships. The fourth is really taking a deeper dive into what are some of those policies that are really continuing to perpetuate the inequities. And then along with kind of that policy element is connecting with policymakers, or really building that rapport with your board in a very different way around leadership for equity. And then you have a 6-month period where you are going into your district to actually test some strategies around your equity challenge that you've been workshopping this entire time. You identify in the first session and solidify by the second session. And then you come and do at the closing convening, share out what you've learned over the course of the last 18 months and how you plan to continue the work. And in between that time, each convening, we try to make sure that there are some touches and continuous learning around the work. And so we will do webinars around particular topics that our cohort may want to see more on, take a deeper dive, or something that we may not have planned to cover. There's also some coaching and mentoring where we bring in additional coaches around individual leadership, and also we leverage the alum that have gone through the program. So it's nice to hear from, job peers that have done the job and actually understand it. Ashley and I feel like we know a little bit, but we've never been superintendents or district leaders. So it's good to hear from other district leaders. And then also, I think what's critical is that, two things I did not say. One, that the program is free. We don't ask district leaders to pay to participate. And then also you can be eligible for some grant support to do some of this pilot and prototyping around your equity challenge. And the last thing I'll say about this is that while we have this kind of projected or curriculum that we will want to cover with you, we also know that the needs may vary for each cohort. And so we want this to be meaningful and relevant for each group of district leaders. So there's room to change this. So I think that's all I will say about that. Next slide. So just some key partners. SDF cannot do this work alone. We have some key partners that will tap into the process. We have partners from the National Equity Project and Center Forward that are really very have some robust resources around that individual leadership component. And then we have a partnership with the Learning Policy Institute, which has some very robust research around those district critical levers that we use to pull to start to really kind of see the change. And so these will be important partners that will be present throughout the fellowship. And so we are very proud of this program, and we think everybody should just want to do it, but we also understand we kind of have to sell it. So some of the things that we think are really good benefits of the program are a number of things. Like one, just some intentional time and space. We know it's hard to step away from the day-to-day demands of the job. And so to really be able to step away and be able to focus on some of these equity challenges, I think is a real benefit of the program. I think one of the biggest benefits and that we've seen our alum really leverage is this peer network, like we're developing and you're tapping to and growing into a learning community, a supportive community of practice of people who know the job, know the challenges, are there to support, sometimes commiserate with you, do all the things to be supportive. And so we hear that that's been one of the really big benefits of the program. Another thing is really just kind of access to exclusive networking opportunities and learning opportunities. We try to really bring our fellows to different conferences. Also, we often ask them to speak at different conferences where we might sponsor that. So, really a lot of opportunities to tap into different circles that you might normally have access to. And then the coaching and technical assistance that we talked about before. And we really try to tailor those to the specific needs of the fellow. So I think that's it I'll say about that. Next slide. And so, ultimately, we hope a number of things will happen from participating in the program. One, we think, we hope that there's a deepened awareness and understanding of and connection about the historical and contextual drivers of racial equity in schools and how we are seeing these things really play out in present day policy and practice, mindsets, institutions, systems, like these things, like the system is producing the outcomes that it was designed to produce. And so we really want you to understand and see that connection from the past. Really also be able to do some real reflection and introspection, really challenging and examining your own attitudes, beliefs, assumptions about students' abilities to learn, regardless of their background. And another thing is really establishing some clear steps for a clear racial equity vision for your system if you don't already have that. One that really is clearly articulated and championed by all the community in the both internal and external to the district. Also really be able to sharpen your ability to diagnose what's happening in your system and be able to look at something and say, yeah, on the surface, this looks one thing, but I could really tell how this is tied to some racial pervasive gaps or racial inequities in the system. And then again, which we are very, I think, intentional about is this peer network and cultivating that. And hopefully that you gain this peer network and professional learning community that is just, some stellar practitioner, experts around equity throughout the South. And so that's what we hope you will gain. Next slide. So eligibility, I think I talked a little bit about it before. So we are this is really for public education. SCF is an unapologetic proponent of public education. So you should be in a public school district or even a charter school, public charter school. And, you know, our name is Southern Education. So you should have a connection to the South. Although we do make some exceptions on a case by case basis. We do have alum who have been in districts from New York and Chicago, not Chicago, Illinois. Carol would kill me if I said that her district was Chicago. And then really must show and demonstrate that there is a presence of a significant equity challenge in the system. You know, I mentioned before that it is a free program, like SCF pays for this, but what we ask is that you are fully committed and that you're available and committed to attending and fully participating and engage in all of the convenings, and also that you are very, like you're committed to identifying and supporting the involvement of other players in your district. And so those are really the real eligibility requirements. And so we have more on that on our website, which you will see here, and we'll share more at the end. So I think that is it for the overview of the fellowship. And Ashley, there's no questions in the box right now. Okay, well, we are going to move into, again, what I think is the absolutely best part of the program. And we are going to hear from two of our alum. What is the next slide? Is it, so individual. So I'll introduce them individually. So first we will hear from Dr. Rebecca Kay, who is the Senior Advisor for Government and Parent Family Affairs at Guilford County Schools in North Carolina. This is her slide, so I will let Dr. Kay introduce herself to tell us a little bit about, she was in our first cohort, so tell us a little bit about her experience and, you know, her setting or context, the professional context at the time. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Kay.
Thanks, Dr. Williams. Kenita and I both earned that title after we started this RELN journey together.
Yes.
So when I was part of RELN Cohort 1, I was working in Oklahoma City Public Schools. OKCPS is, you'll see here, 46,000 students. It is debatable because the 46,000 includes charter school students in schools that are authorized by the district. The district now has around 35,000 students in district-run schools. It is a district that's 85% students of color. It is 90% free and reduced price lunch. So it is a district that is has like every story that we know about the development of the way that policies impacted some communities having access to resources and other communities not having access to resources, and the kinds of disparities that we see in instruction and in student outcomes. All of those were present and still are present in Oklahoma City schools. I got to OKCPS at a time when there was a lot of energy around a new superintendent. I was the chief of staff in that district. I started leading a task force around Northeast Oklahoma City that was made up of a wide variety of community members. So from teachers and principals to faith leaders and community members, and but situated in the historically African-American part of town, the part of the city that had really been decimated by urban renewal in the 1960s and 1970s. And there was a lot of history of pain in that part of the district. The schools were failing, you know, and I have a lot of feelings about school performance grades that our state sends to us. I would guess you're not here if you don't also probably share those feelings. But the schools were not serving kids well. I mean, the teacher turnover in schools in that area was something like 90% a year. You know, like if we were lucky, we would have 3 or 4 teachers that stayed from one year to the next. So there was this community group that I like got into relationship with, and they made these recommendations for how we were going to move forward. And meanwhile, along comes Southern Education Foundation and the Racial Equity Leadership Network to help me really think through like how to get my arms around this challenge of like being an equity leader in a system where the superintendent and the school board, like they know the right things to say. They know like our data, like the data is what it is, right? Like the data very clearly shows that we have a problem, like students who, in addition to like that 85% students of color broke down to about 56% of the students are Latinx or Hispanic, and about 20% African-American. Like our students who were still English learners were performing at a higher level academically than Black students in our district. So it was really hard for me actually to pinpoint what my equity challenge was. And we can talk more about that because I definitely want to make sure that I give Cloyd equal time to talk. But the problem that we really put our finger on was that like there was kind of an internal issue around awareness of equity because there had been a lot of leadership turnover in the district. So people inside the district were really just holding on. Most of them wanted it to be better, but we didn't even really have language to talk about race. We didn't have language to understand the history and the ways that people had tried to fix it, and in some cases made it worse. And then outside the district, we were living in a city that was governed by people who had attended, largely men, who had attended the district when it was segregated. And they had a certain idea of what the district looked like that was not really what the district looks like anymore in 2017, 2018, 2019, when I was part of the team. So, RELN comes along and gave me a lot of tools in my toolbox. Like what you are signing up for in this fellowship is having a huge investment made in you and your leadership. And it's not just in your district, like it is for your district, but it's you that will change. And so yeah, I don't know how much like of the whole story you want me to tell right now, Kanita, but kind of what happened in my story is that I worked with the school board to actually create an equity policy, and it is beautiful. It starts with words that are very similar to what Kanita just said, that we believe in a future in which social factors do not predict student outcomes. And from that, my design team was basically our district's executive leadership team, because we really needed to learn together about like how identity matters and what the history of our city was and what the history of our district was, and learning how to listen to the people who are most impacted by these historical issues, by the problems that the problems that are just that come with that history of disparity. The ways that it's difficult to get teachers to stay in challenged communities because the work is really, really hard. So we created an equity action, like we took the policy, it has some different segments of like what we consider to be the components of equity. We created an equity action plan of the 6 areas and what we were going to do in the next 6 months that was going to touch each of those areas. I, as the chief of staff, was able to sort of like coach and assign people to be responsible for those pieces. And then my superintendent resigned and I became the acting superintendent for a semester. And things were crazy. The Oklahoma teacher walkout happened during that semester. And one, like probably the reason that I am still here 5 years later and will say yes to anything that SEF asks me to do is that it was the people in RELN who held me up when everything was falling apart. And it was really hard. And I was able to, with the support of this group and the support of so many other people, hold the strategy together during that time when the district didn't have leadership or permanent leadership. And then we were able to bridge into keeping the thread through to an equity-centered district redesign. And the principles that we learned, the tools that I had in my toolbox from the RELN experience really helped me to design a process for that redesign that was not just community-centered, but equity-centered, really thinking about like power and power dynamics and community engagement, making sure that we were really clear up front about the touch points where we were going to engage the community and where the community was going to be involved, being honest with people up front that like I can't, like transparency and me having everything planned out for the next 5 years can't coexist. So we're choosing transparency. It's going to be messy, and just sort of being willing to say, I don't know. I think RELN really helped me learn how to be more vulnerable as a leader, because it's hard sometimes because people expect you to have all the answers. And we got to around the time that my fellowship wrapped up, a total redesign of the footprint of the district that centered values that we went into it with, that included things like it was a district-wide problem and it needed a district-wide solution, that we were going to cross historical lines of segregation, that all kids deserved access to diverse schools, and that we were going to build on what was working. And that plan passed with a unanimous board vote. It was really hard. We closed 15 schools. But one of the elements of it was that we were reinvesting money that we were saving into putting funds and extra resources into a set of innovative transformation schools that were those schools that Northeast Task Force had focused on up front. They were our schools that were the most fragile. We used a lot of data. You saw that in the framework for RELN's leadership model to define which schools those were. And we had to go through the process of negotiating with our union to have teacher leaders leading grade levels who were skilled instructional coaches to support their colleagues and make sure that there was more leadership around instruction, improving quality instruction. And, you know, like the pandemic kind of like threw us all on our behinds a little bit, but, you know, I am very proud to say today that every one of those schools has improved student achievement, even with the pandemic having happened in between. And I think there were 5 total, 4 of the 5 have improved their state report card grade by 1 grade level. So D is not something to celebrate, but it is better than F. And they were deep Fs to start with. So I think you know, after that, like a lot more happened, like the story didn't end there. And I can talk more about that after we hear from Cloyd. But I think what I hope that the leaders who haven't been through this experience yet, because you're all coming and it's going to be great, is like RELN really helped me think about power and how to flip the way that we usually think about like some people not having a voice. Like no one doesn't have a voice. Some leaders don't have ears. It really helped me think about how like we're writing science fiction to imagine this future that doesn't exist and hasn't actually existed anywhere because the system was designed to work this way. So we have to kind of give ourselves a little grace, and we have to have a network of accountability. And that is really the most important thing that I got out of the fellowship. Is I still call my counterparts who were in the fellowship when stuff is really hard. And I feel accountability to my cohort mates in the fellowship in a very different way than I do to my colleagues, because my cohort mates can see this place that doesn't exist yet with me, that the people that I work with, like they don't even get it. And that is a kind of, it's this accountability that is the count on ability kind of accountability. And I know that I am a better leader, that I have a higher standard for what I do and what my team does as a result of this experience. And I encourage everybody to come and join us, learn about yourself.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. That was perfect. I had some questions, but you actually touched on each and every one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to our other colleague, the very soon to be Dr. Cloyd Goff Jr. So very excited about that. Who's superintendent of Hazelhurst City School District in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. And so future Dr. Garth, we're going to ask you to start by telling us about you, your district size, and some of the equity challenges that you were facing that made you even want to go ahead and be part of a fellowship like this.
Dr. Williams, thank you. I'll say this first. If you are on the line, you want to get into this cohort, because this is absolutely the best cohort that you could possibly be part of. I tell my district team that we're not a family, we are a team. But for RELN, I really believe that we are a family. And that's why I'm on the line today as well. Because if Dr. Williams asks for a request, I'm going to honor it, because the RELN family is truly a family. My district is located in Mississippi, about 45 minutes south of Jackson, which is our capital. I have a very rural district of about 1,700 students. Currently, we have about 9% African American, about 9% Hispanic. We're growing in our Hispanic population very much so. But when I went through RELN as a cohort 2 member, the major problem I had was peak one, just to be perfectly honest, in my district. I was arriving in a failing district that had a lot of problems. One of the main problems was that the elementary teachers were about 60% non-certified. And so I had a lot of people in front of babies who need foundational work. And if they don't get this foundational work, we know how hard it is as they continue to matriculate through the system of K-12 learning. And so I have about 60% non-certified, and I have this 3rd grade test assessment for end of year that we call the 3rd grade gate in Mississippi. And you may be familiar with it, Florida has the same test as well. But what they did not give us that Florida gave was, they didn't give us any coaches in the building, any interventionists. They said, you have to pass this test or those students will remain in the 3rd grade. Now, while going through RELN and looking at some of the problems, I had a great coach during the process. And my challenge was to look at the African-American males and how they were performing lower on this assessment than our African-American females. Had some brilliant kids, but unfortunately there was a disproportionate amount of males who were not coming up to the benchmark that we were requesting. And so as I went through the process of RELN and learning how to frame issues, because I think RELN does a great job of teaching you how to frame problems. You already have the abilities, but having the right vehicle to frame something in is so important, because you can have energy, you can have ideas, but if you don't know how to truly put something into a process without scaring everybody away from the process, you're going to have some issues. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about RELN. It teaches you how to frame without being afraid to fail, but while also inviting people along the journey. And so in the Hazelhurst City School District, what I began to do was look at the teacher perception of African-American males and how they were relating to them in terms of discipline, in terms of what type of discipline was being written up on our males. And what I found out was it was a lot of misbehavior in terms of vocalization. The students are yelling at me. They're being disrespectful. And I began to realize we need to have some classes, some cultural response meetings concerning, they're not yelling. This is how they speak at home all day. This is what they hear in their neighborhood. This is the language that is appropriate for them, that they use every day. And as a result of doing this, we start to see some of the discipline go down just by being aware. And that may sound simple to people, but when you realize I can't teach them if they're at home, if they're suspended, if they're not coming to school at a regular pace, we're going to have a hard time of meeting this quota of getting those numbers up to where they need to be. And that was just one of those, it sounds very simple, but that was one of the main things RELN did for me, was teach me how to approach problems. how to look at them and say, what do you really need to do at the root cause of the problem, and not just treat symptoms of problems? Because I think sometimes in education, we think we can throw money at problems. We can fix a symptom, fix another symptom, fix another symptom. But at the end of the day, it's really a root cause that we don't have. In my case, we had teachers and educators who were not properly skilled to deal with the students from a cultural piece as well as from an educational piece. And that was creating an inequitable situation for my male students. I was proud to say at the end of that year, that elementary school became a C school. And that was something to be very happy about, because we had been a low D and we were a C. And this year, Dr. Williams, we're going to be a B this year, because we have continued some of those same practices in what we're doing. And I'm bragging on that, because I think RELN truly does that for my school, but it also did something for me. Dr. Williams did a phenomenal job when I interviewed in seeing a problem that you had a young leader as myself, because that was my first time being a superintendent. And you had a young leader who really wants to do a lot of work, a lot of good, but how do you equip young leaders with the abilities and with the know-how to navigate some of these situations that make people very uncomfortable? I'm a truly non-apologetic individual, and sometimes you have to know how to marry that with other techniques in order to get a consensus among what you're trying to achieve and accomplish. So Rodney Thomas and Kenita Williams have been phenomenal for my life and for just my growth as a leader in what I'm trying to do as a educational catalyst for my students in Mississippi. And so if you're going to join RELN, I think, number one, it'll be the greatest experience you have ever had from a cohort. I'm not just saying that because Dr. Williams is on the line, but I've been through 4 cohorts, and this is by far the best one I've ever done. It truly has a family feel, and it truly allows you to reach back, to reach forward, to have a network of people who think not only like you think about the problems of our educational system, but it also have people who are courageous enough to be willing to assist you on your own journey. And so if you are fortunate enough to get in this prestigious program that only have 12 slots according to the slide, you will be forever blessed by it, because it would truly help your practice, and it also help your district, which ultimately help the students that you serve. Like I'll be very concise with that, because if there are any questions, I'd love to answer those.
Okay, perfect. So I promise I didn't pay either one of them to come on and pick this up. I promise. So you know what? I was actually going to just go to Q&A, open up for questions, but what I think I will do now is we'll move just to talk about the application, and then we'll come back to Q&A, so we could just end on that. So Asley, if you could go to the application slide. So, you know, you've heard, you know, firsthand from alum of the programs. I hope they have shared really a lot about, you know, compelling reasons why you want to do this. So we hope you will apply. So apply today. The application form can be found on our website, southern-education.org. We ask for a few things: your current resume or CV, headshot, biography. We also do offer professional headshots as a perk or benefit of the program too. So you get new ones taken, the district organizational chart, student demographic data, teacher demographic data, and then there's like a short answer section, just kind of your thoughts about equity, how you approach those things. And so it's not a very overly onerous application process. By design, we try to do that, but it does give us enough insight into the system and you as a leader coming into. And so you see on the screen, first name, last name, you would email it to, it's going to go to Asley, who's on the line, and the application process is coming, deadline is coming up very soon, in about 2.5 weeks. Of course, if there are some extenuating circumstances, we can extend that, but want to get those in as soon as possible. And I think that is it. So we will go to Q&A for Asley, for me, or for our fabulous alum that's on. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor for that. So you can chat your questions in the box, but also just feel free to come off mute if you have questions. Well, I don't believe in keeping folks. If they don't want to be kept, or we don't need to keep them. But I will ask both of you to just kind of close out if you can. And I think you both said it, but I would love to hear it one more time. Just how are you a different leader as a result of participating in RELN?
So
Looks like
while
yeah,
Dr.
okay.
K is thinking, I'll go ahead and speak on it. I think I was changed so much by just the authenticity of the leadership that RELN provides. It's refreshing to have people who truly are in the same battle with you and are willing to share resources, who are willing to truly walk the same walk with you, because that's very rare in a field that's so political. And when we have to meet all the legislative guidelines and all of the community guidelines and the red tape that we have, and just the ability to be able to vent sometimes, as simple as that, with individuals who truly get what you're going through and not only allow you to vent, but then have a solution to what you're doing by providing those frameworks and those resources that we can use. I think that allowed me to understand how to truly approach all issues. So one of my favorites was the safe to fail approach we use in the design. And I do that a lot now. And I fail a lot in the designs of my district, but it's okay. And so I think for me, just being able to be more open-minded about how to lead and how to allow those frameworks to dictate new opportunities as you try to figure out what's best for your students, for your scholars.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna, Cloyd, steal your metaphor, but maybe disagree just a little bit, because I think that what's valuable to me is that everybody else is fighting in the same war, but not in the same battle. So like when I had really hard stuff happening, because, when you get deep into this work, there are a whole lot of people who have a whole lot of reasons that we shouldn't do it. And being able to navigate and persist and change course and get good feedback. I mean, when you are at this level of leadership, there is almost never great feedback. Like actionable feedback, like the feedback you get is in the comments on the internet, or, in the newspaper or whatever, and it's not helpful. And, like my RELN partners, like we got to know each other well enough that they were like, I knew that they loved me. And that when they gave me feedback, it was because they wanted me to be better. And we were all in this war for kids. But because they weren't in my battle, like they didn't have, like they could see more clearly what was happening in my context, and me for them. I mean, I know that has, many of us have changed jobs. I was in cohort 1, it's been 5 years. I'm in a new district. And the approach and the thought process, the ability, like Cloyd said, to frame problems, the network, still influences the way that I make choices. So, like our big problem here in Guilford County last year was that our community has systematically underinvested in our facilities. And so we put forward the largest school bond in the history of North Carolina. And by using some of the approaches, so like we, instead of, trying, like going big on the news, we had all of the people in the district, like we empowered people in the district to talk to their networks, and we gave them the materials and the information that they needed to build relationships locally. So we took a much more kind of grassroots approach to it, and the bond passed with 60.1% of the vote. And that is going to change that's going to change this community forever. I think you will be challenged in many ways, both personal and professional, by the relationships that you build, and by the community that is created by those powerful partners that Kenita talked about at the beginning. And I think it's exciting too, because it felt, and maybe like we were in the first cohort, so a little bit, a lot less was kind of firmed up during that time. But it's constantly developing and learning, because that's what equity, like that's what it means to be a leader for equity, is to constantly be learning and growing. And Kenita and Southern Education Foundation, the partners who put on the program, do a beautiful job of modeling that and holding space for community to kind of grow and bloom. And it's just been wonderful. So please come join us.
And I did not pay her to say that. So, but I mean, I think your comments, the both of you, are a perfect way to close out. We're really grateful to you as leaders to trust us in this process, and just thank you for still being engaged and being here with us today and sharing all your wins and a few of the tears that you may have experienced too. So if there are no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and close it out. You will see here how to contact us if you have any questions about the application process. This was recorded, so we will share it out in case you want to watch again and listen to the phenomenal stories from our practitioner experts that joined us. But other than that, thank you again to Cloyd and Rebecca. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. She shared her contact information.
If anybody wants an offline reference where Kenita's not listening, that's my email address. Bring it.
Thank you for that. Bye, everyone. Thank you.